Welcome to Culmination's Journey to Faith, where we find meaning in our lives. Today I'm joined by my good friend Joel Kaufman to discuss his journey in finding faith and purpose in his life. And with that said, let's get started. So Joel, first of all, thanks for coming on here, man.
Thank you for inviting me. This is an honor to be, interviewed by a Purdue student.
Yes, so basically this is a new little short series that I had an idea of where I was just very interested in listening to people's stories. When I did the original Culmination series, those were always my favorite episodes, and I'm always curious to learn more. And I feel like faith is a topic that's not exactly talked about as much. It was my 50th episode topic. But here, I'd like to treat this series as a way to greenlight some very interesting people. So, yeah, take it away, Joel. Let's start from the beginning, shall we?
I would like to talk about the heritage that we have, my parents had. My mother came from near Peoria, and my father grew up near Cissna Park, Illinois, but it's still central Illinois, basically. And north of Purdue University, in the area around, Wolcott, Remington, in that central region, is a bunch of Christian culture that's exactly the same as my parents. The early immigrants from Germany, from our particular part of Germany and Switzerland, and from our Christian background, came following the Toledo and Peoria and Western Railroad, and they settled in those towns along that railroad, and the towns were small farming towns, and they really, we're talking maybe 1880s, 1890s, that was the first migration. And my grandfather, great-grandfather, they drained the swamps and the marshes and started farming in small farms. And
was it like uninhibited?
Yeah, well, actually it was very swampy, very marshy, a lot of small lakes, and it was just not drained in the area of East Central Illinois, where I grew up in Cissna Park, Illinois, for sure. Other areas of Illinois that had better drainage were settled earlier, but no, that was later. And the farming was tough. It was, they didn't have any money at all, and just a lot of hard work. The old farmers would raise all their food. They'd have their horses and their pigs and their cows, and interesting thing about our part of East Central Illinois was there was a lot of artesian wells, and they had these free-flowing wells that went about 90 feet down to the Mahomet Aquifer. That's just cold water. It was like 50 degrees year round. You couldn't keep your feet in it. And they would milk the cows and put their milk cans in a little milk house, and that's how they kept the milk cold. And they made money that way, And of course, other beef or pork that they were selling. But that's how my dad grew up. He was in a big family of 14. And Grandma died on the 14th child. Actually, there were several others that were born in as babies, but it was a big family, and my father was middle child. And he always jokes about his little one-room schoolhouse that he and this other, the girl that was his same age, Avis, she helped him graduate because he never would have made it without Avis, And he wasn't a good reader, but my mother was from, as I said, a town, a bigger town, Morton, Illinois, near Peoria, and daughter of a jeweler. And she was actually in her second year of university at Illinois State University, then Normal, Bloomington Normal, Illinois. And she stopped her college education to marry Dad. So my mom was someone who really was more of a reader, and definitely, like her father, she was someone who enjoyed people. She loved meeting people. But she herself probably didn't really think much about spiritual things, although in her church, in my father's church, there was a real decision to become a Christian. They were not baptized as babies. They were encouraged, like
you have to find it yourself, right?
Right, and make a decision, and then join the church. I mean, and really make a profession of faith. And so she did that. My father did that, and it was interesting in my father's life. A brother died in a very tragic drowning after he had gone through World War II and was an engineer building runways all over Europe, and then came back and drowned. It definitely shocked the family. Of course, Grandma had died, and her last words when she died was, "Be faithful to Jesus. Don't lose your faith." Well, both parents had spiritual experiences, but neither was really prepared for marriage. Dad being poor farmer who only had a small farm, and Mom coming from city higher education and from a family that was better off financially. And so, the financial stress, the whole stress of having three children, very close together, gave them probably more than they bargained for in their early marriage years. It was tough. And my mom suffered from some depression, as she described it to me. Huh. And she said she thought of she actually considered suicide once. Huh. And
why?
Well, it was, I think, due to post
traumatic stress disorder?
No, after you had three children so close together and lacking energy, she was it's like what happens to a lot of mothers after they've had children.
I've heard of that before.
They're just down. She was just down, and she didn't have help. She was 100 miles away from her own mother, and didn't have a lot of help because everybody had huge families in those days, and there were no babysitters in her situation. And she just had to do it all by herself. And Dad was out most of the day working and not able to help. And she just felt like she couldn't handle it. And so her cousin told her, "Mary, you should start listening to radio, Christian radio." So my mom was really interested in radio programs that were broadcast out of Chicago from the Moody Bible Institute. And, Moody was... It was a good Bible school, but they had a great radio station. And all sorts of people began to influence her life, even though she never met these people.
What was the time frame in which this was occurring, by the way?
We were all just toddlers. I mean,
like what year?
I was born in 53, so this would have been 57, 58.
Okay.
Earlier, actually.
Yeah, you just mentioned radio, so I was a little confused when exactly it was.
No, it would be when I was pretty young, maybe just 2 or 3, even on the birth of my brother, a third child. So she starts listening to all these people, and they were from all over America. They were great Bible teachers, and she had never really studied the Bible before. She had never really thought much about what was going on in the rest of the world either. But here on this radio station, they were introducing missionaries, people who had been in all these countries and were doing all these exciting, outreaches to people very, very different from my mother and father, living in a Swiss German community in their little church where, they didn't meet African Americans, they didn't meet people from China or Africa or or even Russia. And actually, Mom really began to become a mission-minded person at a very early age. At my early age, I remember going to school, and my mother would read me these newsletters. So you see, she starts getting all these newsletters from all these people because she was writing to all these people because she learned about them, And so all these people were sending letters from Russia and from China and from Japan and from Thailand and all these countries, and she would read me letters that really influenced me as well. I still remember praying with Mom for people in Russia and China who were persecuted for their faith.
Right, and this was like during the Cold War, and
definitely,
like 10 years after the Mao takeover in China.
Definitely, and so that influenced me a lot. I mean, I was definitely a child of the Cold War. I'm not saying that all the Cold War rhetoric was good, but the good thing that Mom did was she prayed for people, that were, these people in the middle of Russia, Mennonites or whoever, Anabaptist people or Baptist people, who are definitely being sent to gulags in Siberia for their faith, My dad went along with Mom when she heard about these Bible conferences in Indiana or Chicago, and he would go along. And so it really helped Dad too. They both grew together. And it wasn't long until they both began to see, wow, East Central Illinois has, the mainline old churches in every town. Every town had, the Methodist Church, Presbyterian Church, Lutheran Church, Catholic Church, or whatever. And, a lot of these people would go to church, but they wouldn't really share what they believed with other people.
So they were kind of like reserved.
They were more than reserved. I think they just thought
afraid
that religion is something you keep to yourself.
I see.
And so they would they would go to church. And when I was growing up, people went to church on Sunday, but it didn't extend into the week because some people's lives really didn't change that much. I mean, they're interesting, colorful people, and whether they would get, drink a lot and get drunk and just, just the way they talked and the way they lived. I think people actually, just the way many are here in America, is you just think of yourself. You're just spending money on yourself. You're not really thinking of people who are in trouble, people that are poor, people that are in another country, very, very poor in another country, Africa or Haiti or, India or wherever,
Yeah.
And so this was something that they began to think more and more about. And I'll tell you an interesting story. So I came home one day and told my mom, hey, there's some missionary kids riding the school bus, and they live 2 miles or 3 miles away. Well, my mother immediately gets on the phone and she contacts this other family. And that family, it turns out, was in Korea, and their little boy had been bit by some insect, contracted something worse than polio. I mean, he became a vegetable, because of the high fever that he got. And he, could have been dengue or something, who knows. But anyway, they had to establish residency in the state of Illinois. They were from Indiana, and Ray, he was from Colorado originally. But here they are, finding this farmhouse, 2 or 3 miles away from us. It's just like, it happened actually at the same time that several ladies had been talking about the need for, reaching out and doing things. They'd even prayed together. And lo and behold, this family shows up, 3 miles away from our farm. And they all met, and they all decide we should start a special little church in our town that's going to reach out to the whole area, and a church that will help missionaries and support missionaries, and maybe people from our own group will go.
It was like a new inventive idea. Huh?
It was really, really exciting. And Casey, the interesting thing was that yours truly, who's sitting right here, was one of those products. I ended up going to Japan as a missionary for 38 years. So that's another big story coming up here. I'll tell you. So here I was, this little kid, with my family, starting this little church. And our community, which, there was like 6 or 7 churches in our town area. By the way, the town was only 800 people.
Oh, wow.
And one of the churches was over 500 people. So obviously everybody's got churches. I mean, there's Lutheran churches everywhere, and this is like, people would drive by this little shed. We rented space in this old abandoned lumber yard office. The mice were running up above, rats or whatever, and people would drive by and say, basically, we all knew what they were thinking. Like, what are they doing starting another church in this town? It's ridiculous. And, but this minister, this former missionary named Ray Pearson and his wife, they were happy, glad to just be part of starting this little church. And little did they know that this church would go on to be a very influential church in the whole region of East Central Illinois. For 3 counties, and
it's still something, huh?
Yeah, no, the influence was great, and then later on, there were all sorts of other churches started in all these towns, but it was a real beginner, a pioneer in a sense, So what my parents did was really exciting, and I went to Wheaton College thanks to my mom again. I mean, there was another example of where she's listening to this, Christian radio station and hearing a lot about Wheaton College. Wheaton College is one of those famous Christian colleges, and it was very close to Chicago. And of course, Moody and Wheaton were connected in many ways. So I ended up going to Wheaton, and that began my real adventure because at Wheaton College, I meet people from all over the world. I mean,
Oh, wow.
this place was famous, and there was amazing people at that school. And a large part of my class has gone on for, their masters and doctorates and PhDs and all sorts of stuff. I mean, it was a very, very,
astute,
great, how would you describe it?
Very astute university.
It was. And while I was there, I had a real big decision to make. You see, I wanted to please my parents and become a doctor. But you know what? I wasn't sure that I could really handle organic chemistry. I was just needing to make a decision for next semester, quarter's classes.
Yeah.
And so I stopped eating for a day and I just prayed. I just fasted and prayed.
How did you, just as a side note, how did you have the discipline to fast?
It was just a day. But I was sincere.
Still.
I was very sincere. I really wanted to ask God to guide me. And
what did the fasting, why did you fast?
I wanted to understand whether I should go on in pre-med, which is biology or chemistry, or switch majors and go into Bible. And the thought that came to me after, spending a morning and afternoon in just prayer and reading the Bible was God's voice seemed to speak to me, and he was speaking and saying, what do you really want to do? Because I think as children of God, we have freedom. We can do. God gives us freedom. And he was saying to me, what do you want to do? And I was thinking of, a doctor can help people that are sick, that are close. They need medical help and everything. But young people who are making decisions for their life also need help. And I began
almost like a spiritual doctor. Right?
That's right. And I said to God, Lord, I'm your child. I asked you to be my Savior when I was young. And you have led me in so many ways, so many times. And I thank you that you died on the cross for my sins. I can ask anything in your name as your child. And I'm asking you now, please guide me. And I do want to help people put their faith and trust in you as their Savior. I believe that when people trust in you and follow you, you bless them. You help their lives. You change their lives. And that's what I want to do. And it's as if there was almost a real voice that said, then do it. And it was so cool because I got up and, changed my major to Bible. And
it was called Bible?
Yeah, it was a Bible major. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I even studied in Israel in 1974 with a very wonderful professor and a bunch of great classmates. We all studied ahead of time and went over there. We studied at the American Institute for Holy Land Studies, right at the base of I think there was Roman barracks right there. It was right off of Temple Mount, actually, really close. And we had a wonderful summer studying, and I of course studied Greek and a lot of archaeology, and it was a great 4 years. I met great people. And after I graduated, I went to Illinois State University. And actually, that fall after graduation, my father died of a heart attack. And I was really, I knew God was sending me out because I had said as a young person, remember I said that I went with my parents to all these conferences and they'd always ask for people to come forward and make a decision. And I did many times, and I promised God I would be a missionary. And after years of making these promises to God, when Dad died, I knew the time had come for me to make good on my promises, and to really, follow God, really do what God wanted me to do.
Why do you think it was a sign?
A sign? Oh,
yeah.
I was just shocked. My dad's passing was so abrupt. I mean, it was just so terrible. And I guess I was really thinking about the brevity of life and how, what am I going to do with my life? I need to make a decision about what I'm going to do. And I always promised God that I was going to serve God and do missionary work. And
yeah,
I said to God, in my very broken state, just total. My mother was so low too.
Yeah,
We were just shocked by Dad's death. It was before the bypass surgeries came in, and it was 1975, and that's it. We probably, if we would have been closer to a bigger city, Dad could have had a bypass surgery. But in my small town, the doctor said, well, just take these medications and you'll be okay, or whatever. He just didn't. He didn't respond immediately the way he should have, and I knew that God was very, very strongly just urging me to go do what I had told God I was going to do. So I went down to Illinois State University and began working with the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, and as a associate full-time staff member, and really enjoyed the 4 years there. But that wasn't exactly missionary work. I know it was at Illinois State, but I knew I needed training to work with university students and young people, and I thought, this would be a great place to get experience and to work with young people. Casey, it was interesting. I went through Walker Hall, door to door, asking if anybody was interested in having a Bible study with me. I only got 2 guys. One guy was from Iran, and the other guy, Joe, was the only guy in the whole dorm that wanted to study the Bible with me. And it was good. I mean, I still got to talk to people. I knew a lot of people, just by talking to them. But
I mean, I guess to be fair, if you go door to door and ask something like that, it's like they're either gonna think, who's this creep,
this guy?
or like no.
Actually, I got to tell you a little bit more. I can give you some more information about that. No, I wouldn't just say it just like that. I would get to know him and say, did you go? Do you have any interest in spiritual things, or have you been to Christians? Did you go to a parochial school or a public school, or And what do you think about? I had to be easy on some of these guys because they weren't interested in spiritual things. But then it's amazing, you can still talk to people and say, well, so what are you studying? What do you, and find out, what their interest is. And if you just visit with people, they'll end up telling you everything anyway.
Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah.
I mean, so I made friends, and it wasn't like I was trying to convince them to do anything. I just wanted to get to know them and to kind of tell them why I was on the floor, and I was working with the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, and actually groups like that do that anyway. They stand in the lunch lines and just take surveys of people and just find out where they're at if they're interested. And say, well, okay, great, if you're interested, hey, we got activities for you, stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
And that's what they needed to know. Just why you were there. You know, you weren't selling anything, you weren't pushing anything on anybody, but you're just finding out if anybody was interested. You know,
yeah, exactly.
kind of a deal. So anyway, it was a great 4 years, and we had a super group. Just wonderful people were in that group, and I just totally enjoyed it. But I'll tell you, I did a summer short-term project in Ireland, and while I was in Ireland that summer, my mother sold the farm, all the farm equipment, and I was impressed that my mom was actually wanting to do missionary work as well.
She was ready?
Yeah, well, she was a widow, and she was going to go back to Bible school, get her credentials, and then she later went on to teach at a mission school on the Navajo Indian Reservation. She learned a lot about the Navajo and about the needs of, you know, Native Americans, and she loved it. And then after that, she went to Hawaii and taught at another little mission school in Maui. And so anyway, that summer in Ireland, when she was, you know, leaving the farm and selling all the farm equipment, the tractors and everything, which my brother bought from her. He took over the farm from my dad.
Okay. So you didn't completely lose it.
No, but
that's good at least.
But she was leaving, and that really challenged me to think, wow, I need to think more about, you know, doing what I always said I was going to do. And so I came back resolute to begin to investigate foreign missions, to actually be a missionary that went overseas. And at the time, I have to be honest, never dated. I did not date at Wheaton. In fact, people joked about it. You know, Joel never dates, you know. And I was an InterVarsity staff member at Illinois State University, and, you know, hey, there was a lot of people there. And, you know, there was a lot of possibilities, but I never ended up dating anybody. So here I am, the winter of 1979. In Illinois, there were some really bad winters back there in the late 70s. And I wrote a letter to a missionary in Japan, and I said, could you see me in Japan? And she wrote back this 7-page letter of all the reasons why I could work with university students in Japan. And she said things like, you know, the Japanese really don't believe in God. They're Buddhist, but nominal Buddhist. They don't...
Like they do the practices, but don't really like believe in the spiritual
They
sense.
do the practices later in life, but not when they're young. When they're getting ready to die, then they will go to the temple and start talking about death. And
that makes sense.
Their reason for, you know, becoming Buddhists is so that family members will pray for them and to them. Because in their thinking, if they're not prayed to or prayed for, they cease to exist.
I see. Like living in memory, basically.
Right.
Like instead of an afterlife where your soul goes somewhere, it's as if your soul stays on Earth, but just in the consciousness.
Well, and it's very interesting, you know, as I've talked with many Japanese, you know, there's Kyoto, where many bones are put, and then there's the God box where ashes are put, or the grave, actually, you know, the cemetery. And if you ask them where the spirit is it in the God box in the house, or is it in the grave out in the cemetery, or is it in Kyoto? You get different answers. I mean, where is the spirit anyway? You know, and where do they go? And I'll tell you, when the big tsunami earthquake happened in Japan, and temples were washed out to ocean, and all their remains was washed out as well. What do? Where are they now? You know, where are these people? Anyway, when this missionary wrote back this letter telling me about, you know, the Japanese don't really have a God. They don't have a creator God. There is no idea of creation. they believe evolution, hook, line, and sinker. In other words, they believe it all happened by chance. Every bit of this creation, the solar system, the fact that the Earth is perfect distance from the sun, that we have an electromagnetic field that protects us from ultraviolet, that we have a fantastic atmosphere with 70% nitrogen and 21% oxygen, and the fact that the moon keeps the world stable as it spins, and everything is like, what, 12 hours? 12 hours? How did that happen by chance? I mean, all these things...
Well, time could be a social construct.
I'll tell you what, though, Jupiter takes the hits for asteroids that could hit the Earth. Anyway, as I kept going through the years, I hear all these millions and billions of reasons for...
Yeah, like the brain and all the neurons. And
by the way, do you know how many nerve connections are in your brain?
Well, you told me this thing last time, and I looked it up. I think it's like 86 billion.
100 billion. 100 billion, which is the same number of stars that are in the Milky Way galaxy. Okay.
Well, I looked it up. It said 86.
Oh, well,
yeah, it says 86
but I've heard others that said more. But I mean, it's.
I mean, that's what I learned at school. And,
okay,
online.
I'll accept that 86. But
No, I remember you telling me this, and I was like, well, I guess I should kind of look that up. So I looked it up, and it was like 86. All right,
86 billion. Okay, all right.
Yeah,
I stand corrected. But the whole deal is, how in the world did this whole thing happen by chance? And the fact that we have this beautiful eye. Even Darwin himself doubted that the human eye could evolve, because whether it's fish or eagle or fox or anything, you got to have 20/20 vision if you're going to catch your food. You can't have it evolving here. The eyes have to be intact and working. And another thing is the DNA, actually, the cell. This was Michael Behe or whatever, the Darwin's black box, anyway, if you have a mousetrap, you've got to have the spring, you've got to have the place to put the cheese, the board, the nails to hold everything down, and the lever arm, whatever. You got to have 5 parts. Well, that's the same thing in the cell. You got to have the mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, the cytoplasm or the protoplasm, and the cell wall, and the nucleus, the DNA. And you can't get any simpler. And all this talk about, coming from something simple. Well, life has to come from that. It's got to start from the get-go with that, because if all 5 of those parts are not there, the whole thing goes to inorganic molecule, which is dirt. It's just dirt. And that's the whole formation of amino acids and the mechanisms and the machinery inside the cell is just absolutely amazing. Anyway, all the years I've studied, I guess I did have a biology background. I did start out in pre-med, so I was interested in biology. That's big time interest for me. And I always thought, wow, this world is amazing. And yes, I would like to go to Japan. Well, this is what my friend said. The Japanese do not believe in a creator. And I thought, okay, all right, I'll go to Japan and tell university students, about God or whatever. Well, I had to get past a very serious low point in my life, because when I arrived in Japan, I had discovered I could not speak Japanese. There I was, not able to communicate with anybody. And I had to hit this wall, this huge mountain, which was the Japanese language.
Yeah.
And you talk about lonely. There was nobody. I had left all my friends behind. All my dating possibilities were long gone.
Yeah.
And I'm over there by myself with all these fluent speakers everywhere, but not me. I couldn't say anything except Ohio gozaimasu. Ohio is good morning, but that was the only word similar to anything in English.
And Ohio to me just means the state.
Exactly. So I was just really, actually pretty close to depression, had it not been for God. And a lot of people praying for me. In fact, all my old friends from Illinois State University and Wheaton College and all these, they were all praying for Joel over in Japan. So I'm sure God heard prayers. Well, this is how he heard my prayer. So about March, and this is after 3 months of being very lonely. My loneliness was so deep and so thick, I could cut it with a knife. And so one day, as I did often, writing these postcards back to my friends in America, I come across this address, 500 Itagomachi Kofu, Yamanashi-ken, Japan. And it was the address that I had received from my old roommate, Steve, who ended up marrying a girl who told me, hey, when you go to Japan, you should meet my sister. So I write this postcard to Sally Graham, and I said, Sally, you don't know me, but I was the roommate of now your brother-in-law. And he said, and your sister Holly said, well, I should be sure to look you up, when I come to Japan. So I'm writing you, and this is my address, and maybe we could meet sometime. Well, she writes back another postcard, so it included her phone number, and she said, well, actually, she was leaving to go on a trip to visit the same missionary who wrote me that 7-page letter.
Oh, what?
And she was kind of a famous missionary anyway. She was a single missionary, single.
That's fair.
And she said she's going with a friend, and if I wanted to join them, I could meet her in the middle of Japan, in the middle of the southern Alps of Japan, in the city of Kofu. So after making all the preparations, I arrive at the train station in Kofu one evening and look upon what would be my future wife. I mean, after 3 days, I said to Sally, I'm really praying about our relationship.
Wait, after 3 days of meeting her?
It was very impulsive.
What?
I know I was very impulsive. But see, on that trip, I found out that Sally was soon going to return to America, and she was going to go to Moody Bible Institute, actually. She wanted to continue doing missionary work, who knows, in some country of the world, translating the Bible. Because, all around the world, all these missionaries have translated the Bible into literally thousands of languages, honestly. And so she was going to do that. And after 3 days, I was convinced that I had to act fast because she was on her way out of the country and I'd never see her again.
That's true, yeah. And also, I feel like some of the best relationships spawn from just like those split second like connections or impulsive things. Sometimes it doesn't, but like I feel like when you get it right sometimes.
Casey, actually, after we were married, we found out how very different we were. Okay, so that's another story. But I am glad I married Sally. I mean, for all sorts of reasons. But I said that I'm really praying about a relationship when I was saying goodbye to her after 3 days.
What was her reaction to that?
Her jaw dropped and she, oh, that's nice.
like kind of creeped out?
Oh, yeah. She was, yeah. She, what? And so I go back, and for 2 weeks, I'm waiting for a response from her. And no response came. And I physically was sick.
Yeah.
I was sick to my stomach.
That'll happen.
And so one Saturday morning, my roommate comes in with this fat envelope, thick envelope, and lays it down in the bed and said, well, you better keep praying. And so I open it, and in the letter was all the reasons why Sally had not written. She had moved. She had moved her house, and it was a very busy time in her life. And she said, she asked for my forgiveness, and she had just a nice letter of news and everything. And
so these were all envelopes from her.
Oh, it was one envelope, but a lot of news. A lot of pages of explanation,
I see.
news and everything. And then, of course, I immediately got on the phone and called her again, and we agreed to meet on May 1st, which was May Day. And so she comes to my town, Karuizawa, and I greet her at the train station with 3 red roses. And she sees the 3 roses and she says, oh, it's May Day. And I said, it is?
Nice.
And so now she was really like, whoa, what's going on? And then she goes back with me to my, we have these little cabins. We're living in a little campground, whatever, and with these other people studying Japanese. And my roommate, Craig, he was a big guy. He shakes her hand and he says, "So you're Sally Graham. Well, we've heard a lot about you," with a big smile. And then she stays at Janie McDaniel's cabin that night. And Janie says, "So, are you going to marry him?" It was like, whoa.
What? Like even faster.
I know.
Wow.
All the news, these older missionaries were all, smiling and saying things that Sally thought, oh, what is going on? So the next day we meet for a long talk. And the upshot was that I would write a letter to her father and ask for Sally's hand in marriage. And if he said, no, I don't think it's right, I would agree, and we'd just say goodbye, and she would go back to Chicago, and we'd just be friends.
You think him saying that would be kind of like God's answer?
Oh, definitely. I wanted her family's blessing.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I said, when I said to God, I said, "It's your will," and so he writes back 2 weeks later, because it was like 6 days there and 6 days back. He wrote pretty fast.
Huh.
And he got the letter back pretty fast. And he said, "You have my blessing, and not only my blessing, but it turns out that your grandmother knew my mother."
What?
Very well. They were best of friends. And actually, they were relatives.
So you had a lineage?
Yeah. And
that's absurd.
I know. And so,
not in a bad way, but just like,
right.
Just, I don't know, the miracles.
Well, you have to remember that we're all from this Swiss German, these churches across central Illinois.
That's true. Yeah.
And so they were same church background.
Okay.
So anyway,
still.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. And so Sally leaves and goes to Moody Bible Institute back to Chicago. And I'm studying Japanese. Tough. Oh, studying Japanese was so tough.
Yeah.
And so then I go back for the marriage. And it was on the 24th of April. I flew back, and we were married on June 6th, 1981. And
it's D-Day, right?
Yeah, it was D-Day. I thought of that, Yeah. And so we had a wonderful honeymoon and 3 months. And we were back in Japan by September of 1981. And during that time, of course, we studied Japanese together. And that's, Casey, when I discovered we were different. I mean, sure, you have a honeymoon and you're glad to be married, but you know what? Every human
the illusion
being
ends.
Well, human beings are so complex.
Yeah.
And so, you think you've got so much in common. Our background, German, Swiss background and everything. But you know what? We're very different people.
So how so?
Well, okay, we're both very driven people. You talk about drive. My wife's got drive, and she's very disciplined, and she's on time, and she's organized, and she is someone who really puts family first.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I was putting work and my ministry, the work, really important. And, that's a tough issue. I mean, you're supposed to be doing your work and everything, but, family's important. It should be important. Your wife should be important. Your children should be important,
Yeah.
And I had to battle this thing of balancing work and family.
I see.
It was a tough thing.
Yeah.
And she felt like I actually I didn't date her that much. She wishes I would have had to date her a lot longer than I did.
Well, yeah, it's a trial run, you know?
Yeah,
It's an estimation.
Yes. So I have had to apologize and ask for her forgiveness many times. And she's put up with a lot over the years, let me tell you. But she raised 5 wonderful children who I could tell you about each child. I mean, you look at this group. There are children who were raised in Japan, and we taught a lot of English to a lot of people and made a lot of friends. We'd invite people to come to our little church and everything, but people are busy on Sundays. They have, that's the big shopping day. That's the, sit home, watch TV day.
Yeah.
The Japanese are just not into going to a religious Christian gathering on a Sunday morning. Forget it. I mean, but we had a lot of friends. Let me tell you, we had a lot of friends.
That's like a lot of Americans too now, right?
Yeah. But another thing that was really difficult, I should just make note of this, is Mr. Kaufman was a pretty good English teacher. He taught a lot of English. But whenever Mr. Kaufman would talk about evolution,
Wait, so this was another...
No, this was with all my Japanese students.
This is what they're saying about you.
Yeah, this is what they're saying about me. Mr. Kaufman is not a scientist. He's not a teacher. He doesn't know anything about science. So even though we like him as a friend and we like him as an English teacher, we're not going to take at face value what he's saying about God. God in quotes. God in quotes. Yeah, I mean it was pretty tough. I mean for them to make that jump, to really believe that this world was created or that human beings were created. Mm-hmm. You know what? It didn't faze me. I still believe with all my soul that we were created. I mean, I was around atheists for 38 years. And, honestly, the one thing they never want to talk about is death. They are afraid of death. The Japanese, oh boy, they will not give you a potted plant in the hospital. You will never, if you're having surgery, you will never be on 4th floor.
Because
it sounds like death.
Is it similar to Chinese?
Ichi-ni-san, she is death. She is 4.
Well,
anyway,
in Chinese is 死 and 死, like 4 and death.
Yeah.
So
hey, they're very superstitious, and they don't really. It's not at all a good topic to talk about. And the doctors won't even tell people when they're dying. They don't want to know they're dying. If they do. Now, one time, this one doctor thought these 2 Buddhist priests would be able to handle the fact that they were dying of cancer. He told them they were dying of cancer. You know what they both did? They both committed suicide.
What?
Yeah.
Just like that?
Yeah, because they didn't want to face death. I mean, what's the purpose? There's just no purpose.
They didn't want to face death, so they faced death sooner?
Well, yeah. I mean, just like, death is horrible.
It's true.
Yeah, and get it over with, But another, so many things. I could talk all day long about Japan. I'll tell you what, I'm still convinced human beings need a hope. They need a reason for faith.
And a reason to live.
Yeah.
And also, I would take that further, a reason to die.
Yes.
Right?
Totally.
Because, nobody wants to die, not accomplishing anything, or because it basically renders their entire life meaningless.
Well, yeah, and what's the meaning of life? Where, the whole thing of origins, meaning, purpose, and destiny. Those 4 questions, I'll tell you, there's a lot of Japanese that could never answer any one of those 4. Huh. But Christian Japanese could answer all 4 of those. Where we came from, our meaning and purpose, and where we're going. I mean, that's the big difference. And of course, Christianity does have absolutes, and the Eastern thinking is definitely a non-absolutist, and it's very relative thinking culture. everything is relative, and you can't know for sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was a wonderful experience being in Japan. Our family had wonderful, wonderful times making friends and coming to a deeper understanding of the Asian culture.
Yeah.
And Asian thinking. And not only that, but we even had Pakistani neighbors, and they were selling cars in our town to Russians and Africa and all over, And our Pakistani friends would come into our house all the time, and we learned a lot about Islam and the way a Muslim thinks. They really educated our girls about that, And so I think that our girls, Joe has gone to college about that when our Pakistani friend Saima would be over in Fumeta, but the girls really got close to them, and they really did learn a lot. And actually, the one wonderful thing about teaching English to all the Japanese kids in the community was that our children became good English teachers. All 5 of my children became, besides their regular work, they all became English teachers in some way or another. Especially my 3 daughters were teaching Burmese students and Somali students in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I was so proud of my daughter when she graduated from Huntington University. There in the middle of that crowd, watching all the graduates, was this burqa covered, really covered person from Somalia, and with her daughter that Esther had taught, and she came up to us and said, "This is my daughter." My daughter was her daughter. She just really...
Oh, that's what you meant.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see.
And she was so happy to be there and thankful, to Esther, for, what she did. And I just felt very proud that my daughter had really, typical third culture kid, raised in another culture.
Yeah.
Had come back to America and was reaching out to other cultures, immigrants and foreigners in her town. To me, Casey, that, I don't know, Dad's pretty proud of that. When your kids are reaching out to people very different from themselves.
Yeah. Makes you learn more about you too.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, there were many, many blessings of being in Japan, but probably the greatest blessing was just having made so many wonderful friends over there. Christian and Buddhist and just everybody. It's just, and I should add Shinto. Just people that are very, very different in thinking from us, but still, if we went back there, I know I'd be welcomed into, hundreds of homes. Oh man, you talk about great food. Oh
wow. Yeah.
It's amazing.
No, wow. I don't think I've actually had authentic food from. Well, I've never been to Asia, so that's why.
Yeah.
I do like Chinese food, but I heard the ones here aren't really exactly authentic. And by here, I mean just America in general.
Yeah. It was a great privilege. Great privilege. So, here we are.
I guess with that said, as we're kind of coming to a close here, Joel, first of all, your story is very expansive, and I loved listening to it today, so thank you so much for saying that. But what do you think is the big message with faith? What do you think is the big takeaway?
getting back to marriage, for me, many times I had to remember that Sally had to forgive me, and I had to forgive Sally for mistakes, wrong attitudes, selfishness, and stubbornness, pride, whatever. And it's because Jesus died on the cross for my sins that I am forgiven. And I know I'm loved by God. So if I receive that kind of grace and mercy, love and forgiveness,
then why can't you do
God?
Somebody else?
Exactly.
I see.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, that has helped Sal and I, and my children have expressed many times, thanks, Mom and Dad, for, staying together.
Yeah.
You know.
So yeah, I guess this has been Culmination's Journey to Faith. Joel, once again, thanks so much for joining me here.
You are welcome. It's a privilege to be able to just share. I don't know. I guess someday if I'm no longer here, just remember, I'm with Jesus, and my destiny is certain because He died on the cross for my sins.
Well, and also you're here with all of us who remain here.
Yeah. So in the meantime, let's celebrate. Enjoy this wonderful experience here at Purdue University. Yeah.
Well, and all around the world too.
Yeah, right.
So with that said, thanks everybody for listening, and I'll see you guys next time for another story.